I woke up the morning of May 3rd feeling a little disoriented and walked into the home office from the bedroom and started to try to talk. And the words would form in here, but they wouldn't come out here. I literally could not form a sentence. At that point, because we had been to 2 stroke awareness presentations, we knew the F.A.S.T, F-A.S.T, and my husband Marv performed those and realized something was wrong, really wrong.
We keep a stroke awareness bulletin in our office because of my heart condition and everything else. We're always aware of the different things that F.A.S.T says, which is basically face, your arm movements, speech, and being on the telephone. So I immediately asked her to raise her hand and to see if there was any variation, and there was. And I didn't even go to the third step. I just said, honey, go change your clothes, I'm calling 911.
The EMTs arrived in about 5 minutes after the call. They just happened to be in the neighborhood. They also had me run through some verbal things, took my vitals. By that time, I was on a stretcher and out the door in the ambulance.
I did ask them to take us to Bend, St. Charles. And the reason for that, at that point in time, there were only 2 hospitals in the entire state of Oregon that had the equipment to not only pinpoint where a stroke was coming from, but to actually indicate what type of stroke it was. Because of COVID, they said that protocols would not allow us to go to St. Charles and Bend, that they had to take us to the St. Charles Hospital in Redmond.
Due to COVID, we had to go to our local hospital first. The main hospital was reserved for COVID emergencies. So we went to our local hospital, to the ER. I was there for about 3 hours. They did a CT scan and an MRI and discovered that I needed to get to the Bend Hospital ASAP. They were going to life-flight me. The helicopter was busy, so it was another ambulance ride into Bend. Because of COVID, Marv could not come into the ER with me. He stayed out in the parking lot.
I called one of our Rotary members who happened to be a co-founder of Stroke Awareness Oregon, Lene Hunter, and I told her what was happening, and she said, sit still. And even though she lived in Bend, she was in the parking lot with me in about 35 minutes, which was a godsend for me because with her experience, she knew basically what was going to happen and everything else. And she told me that at some point in time, Louise would be transferred to Bend, St. Charles, which happened about 2.5 hours later. Yeah, I followed the ambulance to St. Charles in Bend, and then it was the same process of Louise going into the emergency room and me staying out in the parking lot. I had to wait until I got a phone call from the nurse saying that Louise was going to be in ICU after she left the emergency room. I was able to talk with her, and from that point on, the only way I was able to find out what was happening was either I talked to her on the phone or somebody from the nurse's station called me, or I had spoken to the doctor.
Once I was transferred to St. Charles Bend, I was in the emergency room for probably 5 hours while they were running tests. My blood pressure spiked, so I was then transferred to ICU, where I stayed for 3 days until they could get my blood pressure under control. The CT scan and the MRI revealed that in fact I did not have a stroke, although I had stroke-like symptoms. I had a subdural hematoma. I had slipped on a wet spot on the kitchen floor, fallen, hit my head. It started to slow bleed, and my skull was literally a quarter full of blood. It had pushed the brain off center, and it pressed on the speech center of the brain.
Her blood pressure was extremely high. Her systolic was over 200. And so it took a few days for the medications to try and kick in to lower the pressure before they can actually do the surgery, which was a craniotomy to reduce the pressure that was on the brain and to actually drain the blood that was in her brain, which at that point in time we did not feel there was a good outcome. Because of the COVID protocols, I couldn't see her. When they decided to do the operation, which was about 3 days after she had been admitted in, I was permitted to go into the hospital to talk with her, to talk with the doctor for 20 minutes. And then after that 20 minutes, I was asked to leave the hospital. So that was quite difficult. The surgery happened, and the doctor said that it was a successful surgery, but that I still could not see her. So any time that she met with anybody in her, in her room, other than the nurse, we did FaceTime. So I was aware of everything that was going on with any of the doctors or the therapists that were, doing any of the protocols with her. After about 5 days, she was transferred to rehabilitation within the hospital. And even though I couldn't go into the hospital, I found a back door that she could actually meet me, but we were still divided by a glass partition that, we couldn't touch each other, but at least we could see each other. So for the next 3 days, I went, and that's how we kind of communicated. After the surgery, I talked to Lene, it's from Stroke Awareness, as to, what happens now? Okay, where do we go? What should we be aware of? Who should we talk to? And at that point in time, she suggested that we might want to see if we can get into inpatient care because of the type of care that she could get, which would even be better than the care that she got in ICU.
It's basically speech therapy, occupational therapy, and physical therapy. I had 3 appointments a day with those folks. Testing responses, testing all kinds of things to make sure that I was in fact ready to go home. As I was healing, the aphasia eliminated. I was no longer having difficulty speaking. They came in and told me I was ready to go home, and quite frankly, I was scared because, yes, I wanted to come home and see Marv, but I felt safe in the hospital.
The angst was there, and on both our parts, about what's going to happen, but we were told that in the home that there would be the same types of therapists coming to the home. That was speech, nurse, occupational, and also physical therapists. And so we felt a little bit better about that because we knew somebody would be in the house at least every other day for however long that we needed to do that. So we came home, and Louise was quite anxious about doing different things, but it was important for her to start to do things that she would normally do, like just reading a recipe and cooking, because her mind had to kind of redevelop into assimilating what has to be done first. And that took maybe a couple of weeks for her to get to, and she felt more comfortable doing different things. I think now that we're 5 months away from the initial surgery, I think she's at 100% back, because life is back to where it was. The only thing different for us now, and we try and promote this to everybody we know, make sure you're familiar with F.A.S.T, especially when you get to a community where everybody living here is at least 55 years old. Just be aware of it, and because of it, we had Stroke Awareness, give a presentation here to our community. And if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't have Louise with me now.